Okay, here we go. 9.6. So, the rest of this chapter, we are learning how imaginary numbers, right?
Yeah.
So, you're going to think deja vu for the rest of this chapter. You're going to think, I think I've already done this already because we're still doing polar. And instead of polar to rectangular, polar is r comma theta, right? We hope you know that polar is r comma theta.
Yeah.
And now complex is, do you guys remember a plus bi? Complex numbers have a real part and imaginary. But this book doesn't use a plus bi. This book uses x plus yi, but it means exactly the same thing. So we're going to learn how to go from polar to complex and complex back to polar. And you're going to say to yourself, I think I've already done this at the beginning of this chapter. So hopefully we have a better score on the next test. Okay, so here's the formula. What's r cosine of theta stand for?
X.
X. So do you see why that stands for that? And r sine of theta stands for y, and do you see why they're equal to each other?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. This looks familiar. I'm hoping this looks familiar.
Yeah.
Both of these look familiar. Okay, so here we go. Part one, we're going to go from complex form to polar form. So, if you want to go from complex to polar, I want to put it in the form of r cosine of theta plus I sine of theta. Good? So all I need to find is the r and the theta. How do we find the r? R is equal to the square root of, instead of a squared plus b squared, the book wants us to use x squared plus y squared. It means exactly the same thing. What's a negative 4 times a negative 4? 16 plus 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3, and 4 times 3 is 12. 16 plus 12 is 28, and the square root of 28 is 5.3. Right? So in place of r, we put 5.3. I square the negative 4, I square the 2 square root of 3, that's already at 16 plus 12. Square root of 28 is 5.3. Now I need to figure out what the angle is. The angle is the tangent inverse. I think we've done this before, haven't we? Tangent inverse of y divided by x, and you know my rule. I don't care if these are both negative, if one's negative and one's positive. I like just working with positive, and this will always turn out to be a reference angle, right? And then you can figure out which quadrant. So I'm going to do a positive 2 square root of 3y over the x, which is 4. And I always work with positives. So if I do tangent inverse of 2 root 3 divided by 4, I'm going to get 41 degrees about. It's 40.9, so 41 degrees. But is that the answer? You have to draw a picture in your head or something to figure out which quadrant we're in. When x is negative and y is negative, which quadrant are we in? Third quadrant, right? So 41 degrees cannot be the answer. I need to do what with the 41 degrees on my calculator? Add 180 to it. So the answer in the book will be like 221. So I'm going to change this to 221 degrees. Final answer. This is what you're going to see in the book. This is what you're going to see in the book is the final answer. Good to go? I don't know if we need to do both of these. It's not going to hurt. Let's just, I'll go quickly. I'll go a little quicker. R equals the square root of 3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4. It's the square root of 13, which is, 3.6. Cosine of something plus I sine of something. Don't forget the little I because it's a complex number. And all I'm going to do is do tangent inverse, and I'm going to work with a positive value again, 2 divided by 3. And then that'll only give me a reference angle. Tangent inverse of 2 divided by 3. 34 degrees, about 34 degrees. But which quadrant are we in? X is negative, Y is positive. You are in the second quadrant. Subtract 180. Never add 90. You never go off the y-axis. You always go off the x-axis. 146 about this is going to be. Good? Okay, I know I don't need to do number 3, but some of you got this wrong on the test. So I just want to go over number 3. Do you notice that the first two have i's? This one has an I, but these two have an x and a y. This one only has the y value, right? I can write this as 0 plus 8i, same thing, right? 0 plus 8i. Well, when you do the square root, isn't it just going to be 8 for the r, right? Cosine of something plus I sine of something. If you do tangent inverse, you're going to have y over x, which is 8 divided by 0. And then some of you on the test didn't know what to do because your calculator is going to say error. But you should know when x is 0 and y is 8, where it's located, right? Where is it located when x is 0 and y is 8? What's the degrees that it has to be? 90 degrees. The one on the test was 0, 4. This was the x and the y, and you had to write the r and the theta, where the r had to be what? Wasn't the r 4? And what was the angle? Where is 0, 4 located? 90 degrees is what was on the test. But some of you took a makeup test, so maybe you didn't have the same problem. But anyway. Any questions on part 1? You're going from complex to polar. Now we're going to learn how to go from polar to complex really fast, because this is all review. Obviously, you can see that this is in polar form. All I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a picture of the cosine of 150, which is over in this quadrant. We have done this over and over and over again. This is a positive 1, this is a negative square root of 3, and that's the positive 2, right? So, all I'm going to do is figure out what is the cosine of 150. Isn't the cosine of 150 a negative square root of 3 over 2? Plus I times the sine of 150. What's the sine of 150? 1 over 2. And then all I'm going to do is do the distributive property and multiply both by 2's. And what happens to this 2 and this 2? Cancel out. Final answer, a negative square root of 3 plus I. This is the complex of this. The complex of that. Could I go backwards and prove to you that it is the same thing, what we did in part 1? I could do tangent inverse of what? Tangent inverse of 1 divided by the square root of 3, and I bet you get about 150. So, okay, last problem. There's something wrong with this one. That's why I want to do this one. What's wrong with this one? It's in radians, right? It's not in degrees. So what's that magical number that you have to remember? Yeah, 57.3. So I need to take 1.4 and multiply it by 57.3. And we're looking at 3 cosine of 80.22 degrees plus I sine of 80.22 degrees. Okay, listen really carefully. Some of you did this wrong on the test. These popular angles, 150, 240, 30, 60, all those ones we know, right? I told you to draw a picture on the test. You know 150. I want you to draw a picture. Do we know 80.22? No, you don't have to draw a picture if you don't know 80.22. So all you're going to do is figure out what the cosine of 80.22 is and multiply it by 3. Sine of 80.22 and multiply it by 3. I think the ones in the book, though, are the ones you know. So I don't even know if you even have to use the calculator part. Do you want me to finish it, or you guys get it? You guys get it, right? So, you want the answer. Cosine of 80.22. Cosine of 80.22 times what? 0.5. 0.5 plus sine of 80.22. 0.98, but then I'm going to multiply it by 3. You're going to get close to 3 at 2.95. So I'm just going to go 3i. Final answer. 0.5 plus 3i. Nope. Is there always going to be a plus in the middle? No. It's not always going to be a plus in the middle. Which quadrant are we in? Which quadrant are we in? First quadrant. Your x is positive and your y is positive. Which quadrant are we in here? Second quadrant. What's true if you're in the second quadrant? X is negative while y is positive. So I'm glad you asked that question because nope, it's not always positive. It depends on what kind of angle they give you. Questions on today's assignment? You should be able to finish this with ample amount of time at the end of the hour. So some of you need to do better on the second half of the test. This was the last couple of problems on the test. Some of you didn't know what to do with tangent inverse or x squared plus y squared or a squared plus b squared or whatever it was. What's this assignment? It's on page something. Page, I think, what are we on? 9 point what? 9.6? 9.6, page 590. You're starting with 27 through 41 odds. Can you do all? If you really want to make sure you understand it, you could do it all. But you're really only doing part 1. You're doing 4 problems, and part 2, you're only doing 4 problems. You have 8 problems to do, and that's it. 8 problems to do.